When last we were talking about material facts, we talked about facts about the property, negative facts about the property, you got that, okay? Then we started talking about facts related directly to the property. We had a fun conversation about some of those in my area, your area, etc. Here's some good news for you. On the exam, we cannot go gray. A lot of that stuff we talked about, we can't do that to you on the exam. You have to be able to discern on the exam whether it's material or not. So we won't play games with you about that. That won't be the truth, okay? Let's talk about these last two categories right here. Another thing that's considered a material fact is the ability of a principal in a transaction to complete the transaction. The ability of a principal in a transaction to complete the transaction. I'm assuming that's what that third bullet point right there says, okay? Now, this is a material fact. Now listen to this. Is it the seller's business? The seller's selling a house for $200,000, okay? Is it any of the seller's business that the buyer has $1 million in the bank? No. However, it is the seller's business that the buyer can come up with how much money? $200,000. Have you ever heard, are you familiar with the concept of pre-approval letters, pre-qualifications? The reason we do this is because it's material. If your buyer is going to take that guy's house off the market, in fairness, the seller needs to know, does he have the ability to acquire the property? Now, talking about mistakes that agents make, I see this all the time. A buyer will be buying a property, and let's say it's $200,000 since that's what we use, and they're paying cash. Now, if they're paying cash, there's no lender involved, right? So how are you going to prove that the buyer has the liquid assets to buy that $200,000 house?
Bank statement.
Letter from a bank. Be careful about the bank statement. Be careful about the bank statement. You know, I think occasionally I'll have agents who will show a copy of the bank statement. You know, show they have $800,000 in the bank. And I'm like, why would you tell the seller that? If I'm the seller, I just raise the price because you got too much money, and I think you deserve to pay more. I don't know if that's the case or not. But never tell the seller that your buyer has the ability to pay more than what he's offering. All you're doing is potentially affecting their negotiating position, okay? But in fairness to the seller, I need to know, does he have the ability to buy this property for this price, right? How about on the seller side? Is there ever anything material about the seller's financial position? For example, let me ask you this. My seller is 3 payments behind to the bank. Is that material information to the buyer? Not yet. Not yet. The two questions I'm going to ask is the seller upside down, underwater? Because here's something you can believe, that it's always true. If your seller is involved in a short sale, now I know we haven't defined a short sale yet, but they're upside down, they don't have the ability to convey clear title without the bank's approval. A short sale is always a material fact. You can write that down, okay? Later when we talk about short sales, you'll see why this is material to the buyer. The buyer shouldn't spend any money trying to acquire the property until he knows that the bank is going to approve the short sale. That's why it's a material fact. How about this? Now remember, it was not material that my seller is behind in his payments. But how about when the bank comes out and posts a notice of what? Foreclosure. When the bank posts the notice of foreclosure sale, now it's a material fact. Because now there's going to be a time element involved. I'm not saying you can't buy it, buyer. I'm just saying you need to be aware that they have already posted the notice of foreclosure sale. And so you need to get in, buy the property, and close in a timely manner so that it's not affected by the foreclosure proceedings. Okay? The ability of a principal in a transaction to complete the transaction. Tell me what you think about this. You have someone's beautiful $400,000 house under contract. Your buyer, you're the buyer's agent. Your buyer is buying that house based on his income. He's under contract. He's done the inspections. He loses his job. Do you think you need to disclose that to the seller? Well, that's tough, isn't it? That's hard. Your buyer's getting ready to lose this house. Okay, problem. If the income that he made on that job was used to qualify, and he just lost that job, this is a material fact. The seller needs to know. So every once in a while, you're in these positions where it's very, very difficult. Okay. Now, if the lender steps forward and says, you know what, Chris, no problem. We will write him an approval letter, even though he doesn't have this job anymore. Hey, if the banker writes an approval letter, then there's nothing to disclose. But if his income was based, if his approval was based on that job and he loses the job, the seller deserves to know. Is the buyer going to lose some money? Yeah. He's going to lose his due diligence. If it's after the due diligence period, he's going to lose his earnest money. You don't have to know what I just said. It doesn't come up to chapter 10. Okay. Also, look at the last bullet point. I like this one. It's a material fact. Anything known to be of special importance to a party. Notice I didn't say anything known to be of special importance to your client. Obviously, if your client tells you something's important to them, it's important to you. You treat it as material. But how about if the other party tells you it's important to them? For example, you're a listing agent, and the buyer or the buyer's agent says, we want to put up a fence. Can we put up a fence? I'm not suggesting that you have to answer yes or no. I'm suggesting you need to help them find the information. Let's get in touch with the homeowners association and find out what those rules are. We'll put you in touch with the architectural committee, etc., etc. Because it doesn't say known to be of importance to your party. It says any party to the transaction. Material facts. Once they made it important to you, you have to treat it as material. These are your material facts that are material to everyone. You will be tested on this. We will not go gray. It will not make it easy, and let me tell you why. Here's how you're going to be tested on it. The following things are prohibited. Prohibited conduct. Now, students struggle with this area right here. And I don't think it's because you don't know the words. It's because they're hard questions, and you have to put all the information together. And the questions are going to be this long. They're going to be half a page long. And the answers are going to be the other half of the page. Okay? Sometimes we don't get more than one or two questions on a page on these topics. The first, well, let me give you a couple of words. And here's the way I want you to think of the following words. I know this is not necessarily the exact definition of these words, but this is the way I want you to think of the words. Willful versus negligent. When you think of the word willful, obviously it means intentional, right? Willful means intentional. But what I want you to think about is an agent having actual knowledge. When you think willful, think that the agent had actual knowledge of a material fact. Willful, agent had actual knowledge of a material fact. When you think of negligent, I want you to think the agent didn't know, but they should have known. Negligent means, as an agent, you didn't know, but you should have known. Do you remember I said that agents are responsible for what they know or what they reasonably should have known? Okay? That water spot in the ceiling, I don't have to turn you into a roofer or a plumber to figure out that there's some type of water leak somewhere. Okay? I reasonably should have followed up on that. I walk into a house in February and it still has the utilities on and it's cold. The thermostat says it's set on 70, but it's 58 degrees. Come on. What much education do you need to have to understand there might be something wrong with the HVAC system? I don't expect you to fix it. I expect you to ask questions about it. How come it's cold in here? You might be asking that question right now. But that's what we mean. What you know, what you reasonably should have known, okay? A negligence, you don't know, but you should have. When you think about the other words, misrepresentation. A misrepresentation means you made a representation, which turned out to be wrong, which makes it a misrepresentation. How do agents make representations? Do they speak them? Do they write them? Where's the most common place that listing agents make misrepresentations? The MLS. The MLS. The MLS has a ton of data in it. Sometimes it's keystroke errors. Sometimes you didn't do the research. You put the wrong number in there for square footage or something like that. So a misrepresentation, you could have said something, but you also could have written something, which later turns out to be untrue. That is a misrepresentation. Okay? And then look at the word omission. Omission obviously deriving from the word omit, left out. You didn't say anything. And you got to be asking yourself, how in the world can I get in trouble for not saying anything? If it's a material fact, do agents have the option of staying quiet? Agents don't have the option. Once you know it's a material fact, you must disclose it. Weirdly enough, does the seller have the option of staying quiet? If they notice something wrong with the house, does the seller have the option of staying quiet? Yeah, because a caveat emptor. Sellers don't have to disclose anything, as long as they don't lie, as long as they don't cover anything up. Now put these words together. Willful misrepresentation, negligent misrepresentation, willful omission. Let me give you some examples. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. Willful misrepresentation. You had actual knowledge of a material fact, and then you incorrectly stated it. There is another word for willful misrepresentation. You know what it is? Liar, liar, pants on fire. That's the willful misrepresentation. Legally, we would refer to this as fraud, right? This is fraud. Look at my example here. Licensee has actual knowledge of a material fact and deliberately misinforms the buyer, seller, tenant, or landlord. Okay? Actual knowledge, and you intentionally lied about it. Okay? Here's an example. Agent knows. Now listen, if you're taking the test, how will you know that the agent knows that the heat pump is not functioning properly? Say it again. It says it. I mean, this is a test. We have to give you the requisite information, right? So we probably won't underline it. But having said that, the agent knows the heat pump at a listed house is not functioning properly, but tells look at that, a customer or a client. Remember, if it's material, it doesn't matter if it's a customer or client. You have to tell them anyway, right? That all mechanical systems are in good condition. Guilty of willful misrepresentation. Let me ask you this question. Could the agent use this as defense? Well, it's his own fault. He didn't have a home inspection done. That's the buyer's fault. Can you use that as an excuse? No, it doesn't give you an excuse to lie. Okay? If you know a material fact, you have to disclose it. You must state it true. Questions or comments on that? All right. Now, I told you that going into the early part of this, that it was going to be painful. It's now time for the pain. Okay? Flip with me in your textbooks to page 619. There you go. That's the way to finish the book. We'll just go ahead and jump to the end. All right, let's go back a little bit farther. 619. All right, let's go back a little bit farther. Back a little bit farther. All right, what's that picture right there? 614. Go to page 614. Okay. You probably looked ahead of the book and you said, oh my gosh, 21 chapters. How am I ever going to finish 21 chapters? Well, you're going to finish 21 chapters and Appendix A. Okay? On page 614, you see what is known as the License Law and Rule Comments. The License Law and Rule Comments is like the Reader's Digest condensed version of the License Law and Rules. Okay? They are extraordinarily long. What the Commission has done is they've written a part. You're going to think that this is extraordinarily long, but it's only about 23 pages. So you're going to read from page 614 to wherever it ends, somewhere probably around 640 or so. What page?
637.
637. Well, that's not too bad. You got about 23 pages. Okay. It gets worse. When do we test? April 9th? Is that right? Okay. You're going to read Appendix A 3 times before you take the final exam on Appendix 9. I suggest you start tonight. And here's why. You will not read Appendix A in one fell swoop. It's going to take you multiple times. Here's the way that I read Appendix A. I start reading Appendix A, and then several minutes later, I wake up, and wherever there is drool on the page, that's where I start reading again. You will go through this several times. Let me tell you why this is important. Do you remember when you go to take the state exam, that there are going to be 140 questions, 100 national, 40 state. 24 of the questions on the state side come from Appendix A. Now granted, we're also covering part of it in agency, right? By the time you get to this lecture, we will have heard 75% of it because it comes up in other chapters, most of it in the chapter we're in now. Let me tell you a quick story about someone in this class who thought she was smarter than I was. And to be fair to her, she was. But because of her intelligence, her training, blah, blah, blah. Remember what I just told you. I said this to every class as long as I can remember. You're going to read Appendix A, and you're going to read it 3 times by the time that you take the state exam. She had a master's in something, and so she's going to go take this state exam. She passed my class exam with flying colors. She goes and takes the state exam. She doesn't pass. She comes back and she yells at me for her not passing the state exam. So I said, she actually failed the state portion of the exam. She didn't pass the state portion, okay? So she comes back, she blames this on me, and I said, wow, that amazes me. So you read it 3 times, you read Appendix A 3 times, and you still didn't pass it. I said, I don't know what to do. We'll see if we can get you some other materials. I said, you did read it 3 times, right? And she said, well, I scanned it once. I said, you what? I scanned it once. I felt like I had it down pat. Well, clearly you didn't, okay? So the next time, it was so funny, I said, go back and read it. I mean, after you don't pass the state exam, you have to wait 10 days before you can take it again. So what I suggested, I said, and during that 10-day period, she passed the national side. She didn't have to worry about that. So I said, just concentrate on this section right here and go take the exam again. She comes back, 2 weeks later or whatever it was. And she said, oh, why didn't you just tell us that everything was right there in that? I forgot. That's why I didn't tell you. You will read Appendix A 3 times. Your success on the state section will largely depend on the effort that you put in to Appendix A. Okay? I want you now to flip to page 619. Look down on the bottom of page 619. Do you see on the bottom left column it says willful misrepresentation?
Yes.
Here's the good news. Some of the stuff that we're literally doing today comes from this. So the more we do it, the more familiar it will sound to you. Now, I shouldn't say this out loud, but I will. The Real Estate Commission wrote Appendix A. They wrote the license law and rule comments. The people that work with the commission wrote that. The Real Estate Commission writes the state portion of our exam. Oftentimes, the examples tend to be very, very similar to what you see in this because it's the same group of people that are writing. You're clearly not going to get the exact same example, okay? Use these. If you like my example, use mine. That's fine. But having said that, these can absolutely be relied on for your study. So if they give you an example of any of these words, please use it. It will help you understand it. It will help you pass the exam. Okay? So now, that was my introduction to Appendix A. Keep in mind, those 23 pages are hypercritical for you to read. If you continue flipping through Appendix A, which you don't have to do it right now, but trust me on this, there's also a summary review of what you read in the license law rule comments, and then there's a specific license law rule test that you'll absolutely need to take over time. I would not prioritize that for this weekend or anything like that. I would actually save the test until later in the semester, after you've read it a couple of times. Okay? You can now flip back to chapter 7, knowing what your assignment is in Appendix A and how you're going to use that to help you for the exam. Willful misrepresentation. You knew, you lied. Okay? Negligent misrepresentation. Negligent misrepresentation. You made a misrepresentation, but you didn't know it. But guess what? You should have. If you had been a reasonably diligent agent, you would have known. I've been involved in 2 cases over the past couple of years having to deal with square footage. A listing agent put the wrong square footage in our MLS. Interestingly enough, the Real Estate Commission does not require that you represent the square footage. However, in our MLS, which is controlled by the MLS board and the Association of Realtors, it's a required field. So in other words, commission doesn't say you have to do it, but if you want to put it in MLS, it's a required field. So agents put it in the MLS. Well, the commission says if you represent the square footage, it better be what? Better be accurate, better be right. Okay? So two cases that I've had to deal with over the past couple of years. In one case, the agent made a mistake on the square footage, never even measured the house, simply took the measurement from the tax records, which we in the field know to be notoriously incorrect. If you've been in another state, I'm not saying your tax records are incorrect, but we know ours are not always accurate, okay? He took that number, he put it into the MLS, it turned out to be wrong. You say, well, how wrong could it have been? $38,000 wrong, okay? The company got sued, $38,000. We actually got sued for over $50,000. We settled for $38,000. Is what our attorneys recommended that we negotiate, okay? Another case not quite as bad, $15,000. Okay, never went to arbitration or to court or anything like that. Our errors and omissions attorney said this: y'all screwed up. I've screwed the check for 15 grand so they don't go after me, and that's what we did. Okay, so let me ask you this: is it worthwhile to make sure that your representations are correct? It absolutely is. In both of these cases, the agent ended up being disciplined by the real estate commission as well. So it wasn't bad enough that you had to stroke a check. You were also disciplined by the real estate commission as well. Okay? That was square footage, septic tank issues. I get so mad at agents about these things, and here's why. Both of these are very, very simple to do. Agents just get lazy. How can you avoid making mistakes on square footage? Either measure the house yourself or hire someone who has expertise at measuring the house. Just do it. Worst case scenario, you pay somebody $125. Heck of a lot less than 38 grand, isn't it? Okay? And in septic permits, I'll ask my agents, if you're listing a house that's on a septic tank, you need to pull the permit, and it will tell you how many bedrooms that the house is permitted for. You take that number and you put it into the MLS. Oh, come on, Chris, do you really want to do that? I know an agent that got sued 15 years after making a misrepresentation on a septic tank. You know why it came up 15 years later? They're getting ready to sell the house. I was told 15 years ago this is a 4-bedroom. I'm getting ready to sell it today, and I learned that it's a 3-bedroom septic permit. I've been living in this house as if it's 4. I want to sell it as if it is 4, but the permit says 3. I'm going to find out who my agent was 15 years ago, and if they're still in business, I'm coming after them. Technically, it wasn't a lawsuit. What happened in this case was they were disciplined by the real estate commission, and also the company ended up paying to upgrade the septic system. Okay, why? Because they clearly were guilty of a misrepresentation in this case. Negligent misrepresentation. You made a misrepresentation. You honestly didn't mean to. On the square footage mistake and the septic mistake, there would be no reason for you to intentionally misrepresent it. But you didn't do your diligence. That's why you made the mistake. That's why you're negligent. Yes, ma'am?
What if you do the diligence and you're copying a number from something, but it's wrong?
Well, it depends on what you're copying it from. If you're copying it from a public record, then you have a reason to believe that that is not correct. Okay? Now, when I say a public record, keep in mind septic permits are kept on file forever. Okay? So I can get the actual septic permit. Now, here's what happens more than likely, I'm saying. Hart County actually had a fire years ago, back in the 70s, in their repository where they keep some of their public records. They lost a lot of septic permits. So if you're looking for permits for septic permits for houses that were built in the 70s, you may not find them. The more recent ones you will find. So what I do in that case, Ann, is I am so paranoid that what I do is I get someone from the county to write me a letter that says, Chris did his diligence. He looked to find if there was a permit. The permit does not exist. And then I put that in my file and I keep it. And then I represent the house as what I believe is logical. Okay?
So a previous MLS listing, you would really...
Not reliable. Not reliable. Okay? That's someone else's misrepresentation. Okay? Don't carry it on. Okay? I recently, I'm dealing with one right now again on square footage. And it was based on a previous listing in the MLS, and it's wrong. You know how wrong that? I know that. I know that because I now have an appraisal that says a different number. And I have a tax record that, even though they're notoriously wrong, says an entirely different number. I have 3 different numbers on one house, in my defense of my agent, well, I just pulled it off on the MLS. But you better hope yours is the right number. Okay, this is a big enough mistake that it could be litigation. Okay, don't use other people's wrong information. Yeah, go ahead.
You said that these can be both written or verbal.
Correct.
So would it be safe to assume as agents, we should just pad everything? If a question is asked and they say how many square footage, what's the square footage of this house? Can you avoid this by saying, I don't know exactly, it's about 1,600, but let me get the exact number? Just,
If you represent it, you should be as accurate as possible. The Real Estate Commission recognizes that there may be variances between intelligent adults by up to 5% on a complicated home. Okay, so if you're talking about a house, as I had another case, an agent was really, really worried about. She had a 5,000 square foot home, and she was off by about 100 square feet from what the buyer's appraisal came back. I said, don't sweat it. I mean, it's a complicated home. And so being off by 100 square feet, that's, way less than 5%. And who knows, she may be right, and the other appraiser may have been incorrect. So we allow a little bit of variance there. I wouldn't recommend padding it. I would recommend saying, my measurement,
No.
my expert says this.
I should have said padding, as in like one way or another,
Well,
but
let me-
prefacing things with,
No,
I don't know, but I'll find out.
disclaimers will not protect you.
Okay.
If you disclose it, it should be as accurate as you're capable of being. Okay? Yeah. Disclaimers won't save you.
So if you're representing the buyer, then you are trusting that the information
Okay.
from the seller agent is correct.
Yeah. I wasn't going to tell you this story, but I will anyway, because you kind of get towards it. I had a friend of mine, she's a very, very good agent. She took a listing on a house, listen closely. The listing was 3,400 square feet. She actually represented it as being 4,300 square feet. Do you think she's a bad person? Do you think she inverted some numbers? She transposed some numbers? Okay. She didn't pick it up. She puts it in the MLS incorrectly. A buyer ends up making an offer on the home, believing that the house is 4,300 square feet. Before you attack, okay? Logic, come on, this couldn't have possibly have happened. Wouldn't the seller have known how big the house is? Wouldn't the buyer have known? The answer is no. I bet you most people in America don't know what 1 square foot is, much less what 4,300 square feet is, okay? So, as sellers, I could probably hold the class, and I bet a third of you would not have an idea what the size of your house is, or maybe it's based on tax information, which is notoriously inaccurate. Okay? So anyway, I don't blame the seller or the buyer for this mistake, but you agree that there's a mistake. My agent had no compelling reason to put a bad number on there, okay? She just made a mistake. You asked me a question about the buyer's agent. Should the buyer agent be able to reasonably rely on this? Well, here's the deal. The buyer goes under contract. Do you know when it's going to come up that this house was not 4,300 square feet? It's the appraisal. It's the appraisal where it not come up. The appraiser always measured the house. So the appraiser says this house is clearly not 4,300. It's 3,400 and change or something like that. It becomes obvious what the mistake was. Nobody has picked it up towards till now. Back in the day, appraisals used to be done very, very close to closing. The idea was that the bank wanted as close to closing as possible so it would be representative of the current market value. Today we do it a little bit different because of due diligence, but at the time, it was always within 7 days of closing. So think about this for just a second. The buyer thinks they're closing on that house next week. The buyer just got an appraisal back and said, this house doesn't appraise because it's not as big as you think it is. And apparently, the listing agent had used comps that were in the 4,300 square foot range instead of the 3,400 square foot range. Okay, we've got a problem. Okay? The seller, what do you think the seller was going to do with the money they were going to get from this house? What do you think they were going to do? They're going to buy another house. They're going to buy another house, which is going to happen next week as well. We have a lot of mad people right now. Okay? There's a way to solve this. The listing agent says, I screwed up. I'm going to waive my compensation. Now keep in mind, this is a house that's in the $500,000 ballpark, right? So 6% commission, and the listing agent did 3.6% of that. So she waives an $18,000 commission. Okay. Andrew, the buyer's agent waived his commission on this deal as well. Why did the buyer agent waive his commission? She didn't pick up the mistake. It's actually a he. It's actually a he. He did not pick up the mistake. Now here's the deal. I don't expect buyers and sellers to recognize this mistake. But as an agent, a 900 square foot mistake on a 3,400 square foot house, I promise you within 2 weeks of getting your license, you'll be able to walk into a house and say, okay, 2,500 square feet, 3,800 square feet. You know, you'll get that good at recognizing the size of the house because you'll get used to being in houses and they have a certain feel about them. Now that agent, the buyer's agent could not have walked in and said, okay, this house is 3,456 square feet. He wouldn't have been that close. But come on, 900 square foot mistake. If the mistake had only been 100 or 200 square foot, I would not have expected the buyer agent to pick it up. But a 900 square foot mistake, that buyer's agent should have picked it up. The listing agent was guilty of a negligent omission. Okay? I'm sorry. The listing agent was guilty of a negligent misrepresentation. The buyer's agent was guilty of a negligent omission. Okay? Because they didn't know, they hadn't looked it up, didn't do their diligence, didn't say anything. Yeah, Jim?
If you're a buyer and you're buying a house in cash and you don't need an appraisal for a mortgage, how would you uncover a square footage issue in the house?
Well, let me be honest with you. If I had a buyer who was buying a house and paying cash, I'd still recommend that they do an appraisal. Yeah, I would absolutely recommend they do an appraisal.
So,
They may or may not do it, but I recommend it.
so both the buyer and the seller's agents should both do appraisals.
Well, let's go back to the our original question. Should you be able to rely on the reasonable assertions of another agent? And the answer is you should. But if you see a red flag, that leads you to believe that the information is incorrect, then you need to check it out yourself. Okay? Here's what's going to happen, Jonathan. Let me tell you what's going to happen in the field. If you detect that there's a mistake, call the listing agent, and you're going to say something like this. Listen, I don't know what the size of this house is, but it just doesn't feel like it's 4,300 square foot. Can I take a look at your renderings of the house? The listing agent now has two choices. The listing agent can certainly help you out. Or the listing agent can say, you need to mind your own business and just buy the house or whatever. Don't be the second agent, okay? You will make a mistake. At some point in your career, you will make a mistake. And you would love it if someone picked it up before you became actually responsible for that. So if someone suggests something like this, check it out. If they're wrong, at least you checked it out. But if they're right, they could have saved you $38,000. Okay? I saw somebody one time in the MLS, they listed a 2,000 square foot home as having 34 bedrooms. Do you think that house really had 34 bedrooms, or do you think it had 3 or 4 bedrooms? It's just the way they wrote it. They represented it had 34. Now, everybody knows it doesn't have 34. But I just called them up and said, why don't you correct this as long as we're looking at it. Some things will not be that obvious. But anyway, help each other out in this business. It's a stressful business. Negligent misrepresentation. You didn't know, but if you've been diligent, you should have. Right? Okay. Let's talk about a willful omission. A willful omission. You had actual knowledge of a material fact, and here's what you said. I don't think they'll find that out, so I'm not going to say anything. But as an agent, you don't have that option. You don't have that option. As an agent, if you know a material fact, you have to disclose it. Do you think that you can do that? Do you think you can do that? Willful omission. If you know a material fact, can you